Hi, everyone. Kristen Bordage again of Partnerships for Authentic Learning and Leadership. So, hopefully, by now you have a draft outline or plan of your service learning project. So, in this screencast, we look at what's next. I'm calling it So, What's Next? We'll look at the role of getting feedback, self assessing your ideas so far, and checking other resources for more insight and more details to help flesh out your plans. This is relatively short, and it's up to you how far you want to take it. There are resources provided that, it could be a rabbit hole and you could be digging into materials for a while, or you could choose one of the strategies here of getting feedback, self assessing, or checking other resources and keep moving forward in your process. That's entirely up to you. First, I'll talk about the role of feedback. My thinking on this is if we want students to get and use feedback to develop and their project, their work, their product, if they're towards the end of their planning and preparation and they're getting ready to take action and implement, oftentimes there's a product. That's a great place to use feedback. I'm going to introduce you to a feedback protocol that I learned in my PBL Works training that I had for several years in a row through a grant project, which was wonderful. Again, the siblings of pedagogy here and student centered pedagogy are service learning and PBL. They're very closely related with the different elements of the pedagogies. So, if we want a growth mindset in our students, how might we cultivate our own growth mindset through a feedback protocol? So, here's how it works. You're going to take your outline and draft and share it with somebody else. If you are interested in more feedback protocols or feedback ideas and rubrics, PBL Works is an amazing resource for this set of tools. It's a free account, and if you are searching specifically for feedback in the world of PBL, they use the term critique to mean the same thing, essentially getting other people's input on your work in order to improve it. So this is what a protocol looks like. It clearly marks out who, what happens, and for how long. You can adjust any of this. If you wanted students to share their ideas for longer, it could be 3 minutes, 5 minutes, depending on your goals and the time frame that you have and the age group and developmental level of the student. You can make adjustments to this. But this is sort of my boilerplate. I use this in my teaching with my own students a lot. When students get used to it, you can use a feedback protocol to end class in just a few minutes, and it can be super productive and highly engaging for the purpose of reflection and improving your drafts as you move forward in your creation process. So you're going to share. You can ignore the share pitch and slide deck. You're going to share whatever you have. It could be a pitch of your big idea. It could be your outline. Basically, you want to try to talk for a few minutes, and that's the idea of the protocol. And then another person, a student, a colleague, a community partner, family member, if you're working on this at home and you want to give it a try, you coach and encourage them to use statements that include I like, I wonder, I have. And that gets to the point of feedback is always kind, specific, and helpful. That comes from both Expeditionary Learning. That's also a site that you might check out, and I've included in our resource list for Module 4 here. They're big on feedback and in making that beautiful work. That's Ron Berger's work. And then also, kind, specific, and helpful is a derivative of, again, all that PBL work stuff on critique and revision that's vital to their method. So the other person does that. And then finally, both of you have a conversation. The protocol leaves space for all voices. So I like that in back to the classroom context. Just sharing this with you, you could just go and have a conversation with somebody and share your project idea and ask that individual to give you a little bit of feedback. That could be as simple as this is, or if you want to try the protocol, you can ask your critical friend to provide you with statements that are kind, specific, and helpful with I like, I wonder, I have. So now it's time for the field trip. Identify that willing participant, teach them the gist of the protocol if you wish, and take a few minutes and have a conversation about your project ideas. Hopefully, you get, certainly the I wonder statements are usually questions that make you think through an idea. I have statements are typically about resources or networking. Again, getting involved in the community requires networking and talking to people and trying to find those right, authentic audiences and experts to include in your project in the community. So you could do this after the screencast. There's just a couple more slides here to introduce you to, or take a few minutes at another time and include that in your module for learning. Okay, the next resource for So What's Next with your project drafts and your outlines is to reflect with some self assessment. If you have had a chance to get to each of our module summaries at the end, I've left you checklists for a quick self check, your own self assessment, informative assessment, just related to those goals of the modules. So you could definitely go back to each module page and you find that module summary and the checklist that I've included in those summaries. That could guide your reflection. And then I also have a few more ideas up my sleeve to share with you. The first is using our resources that have been optional and included in the different module pages. The first is uh, the searchable database. I think that's the technical term here, from the National Youth Leadership Council, or NYLC. That's the professional organization for all things service learning. They have an amazing searchable database where you could find project types similar to yours, whether it's in through age group or the community partner. If you see the tags there, the tag categories, there's so many ways to find something like related to what you're doing. So this would be a good way to reflect. You could find a related product or project rather, and scan it, review it, and then yeah, that could jumpstart another way of thinking as you reflect, and another idea or two to add to your outlines. And that's what we're trying to do here, is to provide you with some tools and resources to keep adding, to keep fleshing out the details of your project plans. Again, you're always going to have the student input piece that may take you in a different direction, and that's great too. But I know in my own teaching practice, I like to go in with at least a strong outline of how the project's going to play out over time, and then allow for that student voice and leadership to enter in and certainly have that shared decision making through the process. But going in with strong ideas is really helpful. So that's one way, finding a related project from the searchable database at NYLC. NYLC also has standards. There are 8 standards of service learning that they use to help guide the what you're doing, really the construction of service learning projects. And that's that learning through service, going beyond the community engagement and service in the community to really learn and connect to academic standards and skills that students are developing within the curriculum. And you see right there, that's just a sample of 2 of the standards: meaningful service and the link to the curriculum, the 2 foundations of service and learning put together. But there are others. There's progress monitoring, youth voice, duration, like how long should a service learning project last, and others. So you could scan this document. If there's a particular area you're interested in, you could scan the headings and then say, "Ooh, assessment." That's something that hasn't been it's been a small focus here in these modules, but maybe it's something that you want to dig into more. That progress monitoring standard has 7 or 8 elements that are really good for just thinking through the progress monitoring and the assessment of the project. So also reflection tool via the standards at NYLC. The last one I'll share is newer for me, but I reviewed it and I like what I saw in terms of service learning project types. There is a searchable database. It's the Jane Goodall Foundation. We just recently lost Jane Goodall this past fall. But in her later years, many of you might recall all of her naturalist work in environments in studying chimps and chimpanzees, and all of her research and observation studies were vital to kind of creating a naturalist point of view on science. But she went on to develop a service learning arm of her foundation, and it's called Roots and Shoots. The resource is linked in the module page, and the optional resources down at the bottom of that page. But I browsed it quite a bit, really like that there are service learning project examples, there's quotes for inspiration. This could be a great site to use for that change maker idea as you're introducing students to their role in service learning. We talked about that in module 1, and I was like, ooh, this is a really good site for module 1, and that change maker idea as you're really inspiring students to engage in the community and make changes that benefit the world. Um, but I really like the compassionate leadership skills and traits infographic. So that's a snippet of it here. Again, this is coming from the Roots and Shoots site. So credit and reference to that site and that nonprofit organization that organizes service learning in youth settings. Jane believed that youth are the hope of the world and are the change makers of our future, and we should be engaging them. So another resource for your reflection, thinking about leadership, youth leadership. I thought this was a helpful tool. To what extent are you engaging students in reflection? Do you have enough of it so that they are introspective and considering that first top left there, how their actions are affecting the world around them? Do you have prompts that are supporting critical thinking, which is another leadership trait, at least at this particular nonprofit site, and so on. So, on the theme of youth leadership, I thought this was a helpful tool. Again, use as you see fit, just trying to inspire some final thoughts on your draft outlines before you implement them. So, in ending with the Jane Goodall resource, I found this quotation and really liked it. You cannot get through a single day without having an impact on the world around you. What you do makes a difference, and you have to decide what kind of difference you want to make. So, really, really think that that's a great summary point. We're, module 4, we're wrapping up, and just so grateful to be part of this with you. Your work is creating space for those youth leaders, for them to engage in the community in ways that are improving their world, whether that world happens to be in the school community, the local community, or even the global. Really, we are doing what Jane's vision was, which is to make a difference in the world and really to empower youth, to encourage them and to build those dispositions and skills that let them do this for the rest of their lives, which is super cool. So thank you, and reflect. Look at those outlines. You have 3 ways to dig a little deeper and put some final touches on this before you. Well, there's 2 things, right? Implementation, and then the Serve Ohio Service Learning Plan that is due December 15th.